This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the Antoine Dupont of website builders. Sometimes you can see the legend being written before your eyes. One of the most important moments in rugby history is rarely discussed these days around most of the world. In 1984, after decades of inconsistency, Australia sent a young squad over to Europe. They would play 4 tests, one against each of the home nations, England, Wales, Ireland and Scotland, a schedule they'd nicknamed the Grand Slam Tour. The Wallabies were underdogs for every single game, Ireland the only one of the 4 they'd beaten over the last decade, and then, one by one, Australia won all 4 games. That young squad went on to become legends. Names like Mark Ella, Michael Lynagh, David Campese, Andrew Slack, Simon Poydon and Nick Farr-Jones, iconic to this day. After decades of inconsistency, this was the moment that Australia announced itself as a world-class rugby nation, as a world-class team, birthing the backbone of the side that would go on to win them Aussies' first World Cup 7 years later. In 1991. A little over a week ago, Australia embarked on a Grand Slam tour again. This young, bold Wallaby team were given no chance of replicating the heroics of 1984, coming off the back of possibly Australian rugby's worst year ever, almost definitely the worst in some 70 years. This was to be a procession, a stand-up, fall-down row of 4 losses, setting up a damp squib of a Lions tour next year. The only problem was, nobody told the Wallabies. This Saturday, Australia kicked off their 3rd Grand Slam shot since that famous tour at the stadium formerly and presently known as Twickenham, with maybe the best match of the year so far. A 79-point humdinger, one of the most thrilling, twisting, turning, beautiful games of rugby you'll ever see. England twice looking set to take it home, only for the Wallabies each time to find a reply. A young squad creating a day that will go down deservedly amongst the best the Wallaby badge has ever seen. So, it's time to dig in. How did this glorious, brilliant Wallaby team pull it off? What the hell is going on with England? And can Australia now go one step further and challenge for that Grand Slam over the next 3 weeks? If you told somebody 15-20 minutes into watching this match it was set to be one for the Wallaby history books, you'd probably flick to check their biggest ever loss. Such was the control of the early stages by England. Marcus Smith having an exceptional game once again as he pulled more strings than the kid trying to kill Sheriff Woody. This is a gorgeous kick. Australia are deploying a dual fullback system, one on either edge, so Smith just slaps it straight down the middle between the two. On the initial angle here, it looks like Wright is just lazy getting the ball, but really it's a communication issue. Both players are convinced the other fullback is going to go for it, and so instead they kind of slow and let it bounce up for Lawrence. Slade and Furbank then do a great job clearing out, and England's shape is inspired. Attack coach Richard Wigglesworth has talked about speed over structure being an increasing mantra to how they play, and this is a perfect example. Smith has dropped into the backfield after the kick just in case the Wallabies recover, and it leaves England without a clear playmaker, so the forwards take over, everyone playing instinctive rugby as they flood the field. Somebody just in every channel, in every zone of the pitch. Tom Curry is the first there, and his involvement is brilliant. He fixes 2 Wallabies and allows George with the head of steam to get a dominant one-on-one collision before offloading to Genge. The prop is stopped but not brought to ground, and it buys time for Curry to wrap around like Johnny Sexton if his hip had gone because of rugby injuries instead of old age and fix Gordon. This leaves only the Wallabies wide defence, and the England approach to overcoming is kind of genius. Instead of sticking to the wing, Faye Weboso, the only back available with 3 lads on the floor and 1 in the backfield, bites inwards to act as a distributor. Seeing a quick lad get the ball causes Peach to shit himself, so he shoots in to deny them any space, and it opens up the wing as such. The pass is crisp, and Earldon just has to slow the covering Callaway enough, who's worked right across from the far wing, to put Cunningham South over in the northeast corner. And then the adult man called Chandler's second try is almost just as smart from England's big lads. After this penalty is given, O'Keefe never blows time off, so both sides just get into position wherever it's convenient, and that leaves scrum half Jake Gordon and debutant 13, Joseph Swally, filling in here right next to the big group of English forwards. George initially goes off to recover the ball, but once he's back in position, once the ball is there, Ellis Gens just points it out to him. Just have a look at the scrum half over there. George turns to look at Gordon, giving Genge his blessing. It's a lovely improvised move. This tap up, instead of putting it down, hitting it on your foot, picking it up again, gives Australia so much less time to react. Suwali barely given time to turn his head before Cunningham himself has hit a beautiful line onto Gordon's weak shoulder, isolating the scrum half entirely and crashing over the line. All from a brilliant spot by the scanning prop. However, that isn't all he scans. For Ellis Genge is also a big scanner of websites, particularly through Squarespace. A big fan of just looking over information quickly, Genge wanted to build a full website where you could just go along and just glance over the information. Didn't want to read it properly, didn't want to take too long. So he did that. Squarespace gives you all the tools you require, all the tools you could even dream of to build a beautiful website so simply. Easily just dropping features in, adding all sorts of things from videos, galleries, shop fronts. If you can imagine it, you can add it and Ellis Genge can scan it on your new website via Squarespace. And with their brand new AI features, you can build that website even easier than ever, giving Ellis Genge endless new text to just scan over, to just run over, to just go, brilliant, I've generated some more text. I've been able to put this together so quickly, so easily. And if you want to do the same, if you want to build your own beautiful website, you can hit the link. It is in the description. Go to the description, click on it, and then use the offer code SquidRugby to save yourself some money on your website. Ellis Genge would do that. He'd love to do that. Joe Schmidt's first year as head Wallaby has been slightly tough to quantify. Whilst the team looked much better organised and composed than under that weird bloke in the hat, they've often really struggled to control momentum and hadn't, as to up to this tour, yet really landed in their identity as a team. And yet, all of that seemed to just change in an instant on Saturday, with something so small as Ben Earl overrunning the ball. England are in total control of the game until this bounces perfectly for Swalii. The Wallabies had manufactured 2 decent opportunities in the first 20 through a rampage from Angus Bale and then a brilliant breakout from Tom Wright and Dylan Peach, but in both cases they then struggled to keep that pressure up, everything just petering out. Here, however, Swalii hands on a glorious ball, hovering it in the air for Kellaway to run onto, allowing the winger to make significant yardage and the Wallaby team to snap into attacking gear. Viewed individually, this looks like a succession of pretty good one-up carries, just everyone getting over the gain line, getting the Wallabies going forward, but when put together, it actually outlines the backbone of a minor Joe Schmidt masterclass. England's new uber-aggressive defence has drawn so much talk, not least from myself, so we could talk about it all day, but instead the essence is they group players together narrow as a unit and then fly up together to eat the space, blitzing hard and aggressive. It's an adaptation of what South Africa do, but more about trying to create an error or a knock-on than a huge game-changing shot. Generally, they want to eat the space, give you no space to play in through putting lots and lots of players in your face. Generally, when trying to overcome this big bank of scary boys, most teams are trying to go round them or over them with long passes or short kicks, trying to get round the fact that the players being packed in tight together means there is often space left out wide. However, Joe Schmidt this weekend flipped the whole thing on its head and opted to be the first guy to go through them. England's D want situations like this, where they can bulk press with huge numbers of white shirts together. As such, it works best from near a touchline. There's no need to split resources or watch both sides. There's no need to coordinate 2 lines going up at once. You can just set up and fly up, reducing the number of defensive decisions you have to make enormously and hence increasing the speed and squeeze you can apply. Indeed, the space often left out wide acts as an almost honeypot to get teams playing into those positions, which will be easier for England to defend the next phase and potentially win that ball back, sacrificing 5 metres for a chance of forcing a knock on. Australia, instead, however, played in the absolute centre of the field, spending most of their minutes right in the middle. After Kellaway's carry, Frost drops a pretty shite pass into the boot, but frankly, it doesn't change the result. Lolasay was just looking to get the ball into the centre of the pitch, and he does just that. England set their big aggressive wave for the next phase, but Australia bring Tupou in so tight to the ruck, it means there's no chance to get off the line. The prop swerving into cunning himself to type a second body. England fly up next phase, but again, the Wallabies hit Wilson close to the ruck. 2 players swarming him, but the ball is fast and Earl's burst of line speed, leaving him having to retreat. Lolaseo carries again next phase before Angus Bell is sent on another mission of mass destruction, just what he did all day. And this phase from Bell is the one that changes everything. With one huge forward momentum carry now in the bag, the Wallabies' short carries around the ruck become instantly so much more dynamic and effective, just by default as England are backtracking. Each time they shoot up now, expending drastically more energy than the Wallabies, who are just dropping it off short to someone walking around the ruck until they get the ball. The men's Red Roses have had to defend so many phases now their line has become disaligned. Marcus Smith defending as a forward, and it leaves Curry going one-on-one against a full momentum Bobby V. Now, Curry is knocked out cold, so players correctly stopped a moment later, but just compare Jamie George's line speed the last time he had to get up and make a tackle to here, now, a few phases on. He's scarcely walking up, and Bell powers over the top of him. Australia's simple left-right jabs in the middle not only prevent England getting into shape properly, but the moment Bell gets that first big carry, it helps disorganise and knacker them until the gain line becomes routine. When play does does restart then. Tom Wright darts around Henry Slade to set the platform, and Australia get right back to it. Valetini, who was unbelievable, and I'm going to keep saying this, carries straight at Slade, who once again has just got back into line, and it leaves him only able to make a very passive tackle, hence losing the contest, losing the contact, and falling on the wrong side. In a classic bit of Joe Schmidt coaching, even winger Andrew Kellaway spots the opportunity here and pins Slade on the floor with his knee to draw a penalty from the referee. Incidentally, Ben O'Keefe had an absolutely brilliant game. Just want to leave that there. There's one more phase before Loliseo figures it's time to pull the trigger. Swali and Wright having a "did we just become best friends?" moment as they get the ball wide, allowing Peach to bluster into the 22. They have a few more good phases, then the attack peters out before going back to the eventual penalty, but this formed the basis of Australia's tactics all day. These short carries around the ruck, usually seeking to draw in 2 or more tacklers, lightened the English line enormously. The English defence forced so much of the play against Ireland and New Zealand over the last few months because of the sheer numbers they could swarm ball carriers with, but with those numbers now off their feet, it becomes invitations for one-on-one carries, which Australia dominated, and in turn slides back to Schmidt's brilliant selection. This wasn't their biggest pack possible, or even their biggest carriers, but instead a side full of guys who always win post-contact meters, who fight for every inch. Knowing England would get up and make that contact early, they wanted people who stay on their feet and drive beyond that in order to both commit a second defender to force them in to get that guy to ground, and also to keep them going forward. That fight for every inch, a trait that went on to sum up the Wallaby effort throughout the entire day. And yet it wasn't these hard-won meters that ultimately won the match, it was how the Wallabies used them. Something captured beautifully in Tom Wright's opening score after the Wallabies kicked that penalty for the corner. After this initial maul, England fly up incredibly well and shut down virtually every option, but Gordon sticks to the plan. He hits Ikitau right in the centre of the palm pressure, who takes a second and looks for the smallest guy he can find, running at Marcus Smith, there he is, to get some front foot ball. This splits the English defence, because once again, he's hit the centre. They're so built on being together, they all end up condensed around the ruck, and with Loliseo now sucked in, Kellaway spots this and comes in to play fly half. There's another touch coming up that gets all the credit, but the involvement of Kellaway here is exceptional. Firstly, to come and identify they need a 10, but then he eyes up Slade directly, looking at him and waiting for him to fully commit to flick it on to Swali. Slight home is just onto the field moments earlier and finds himself suddenly disconnected from his other defenders. The England system wants him to fly in on Swali to smash him, but he second guesses himself and backtracks. Typical winger system fashion, what most teams in Northampton would have him doing, but only after half selling himself to the Australians, allowing the freak, as we'll call him, to slip onto his outside. And then, man, what can you even say about this? It's a gorgeous, borderline revolutionary touch. A preemptive offload, hung in the air without shaping to pass at all, in order to commit Furbank completely. It's the kind of ball thrown by a promising Wunderkind, yet lobbed with the intelligence and instincts of an 80-cap international. It's an honestly beautiful bit of work and allows his new best friend, the guy who puts the step into Step Brothers, Tom Wright, to finish in the corner. This felt in so many ways like a watershed Wallaby performance. Yes, they don't get away with running the resulting kickoff back, but it felt like a declaration of the sort of team they want to be and are going to be now. If there's one word for me that sums up how Australia played on Saturday, it's adventure. Whether that adventure is them running from their own 22 or scrummaging for penalties and dominance all day even when the referee wasn't awarding them, or flooding forward on support lines on even the most unlikely of breaks expecting them, or even brilliant tackles like this from Ikitau feel like adventure to me. Full force smashing a chop tackle at Slade into the floor, allowing Kellaway to win the turnover. Schmidt had plied them with tactics that worked and game intelligence, and all that remained was for the team to find the boldness and passion to deliver them, and oh boy did they do that. The full court spirit of adventure is perhaps best captured by this passage. Having tried a cheeky grubber to touch from his own 22, Kellaway's kick trickles over the touchline and England get the line out. However, we get some line out adventure following up in a brilliant spot by Jeremy Williams, who again was sensational. Initially just looking to wind up Itoje in typical old school Aussie log fashion, as he turns his head, he notices Dombrand is stood near the back and puts 2 and 0 together to twig the replacement is about to lift. Williams can't get anyone back to lift him in time, so he just jumps as high as he can into the gap in the middle, hence nudging Itoje's lifters and preventing the lock getting high enough to regather the ball. Their hands slip down, they lose an inch or two. Slade wins the race to the ball, but Kellaway drops him to ground and England's ball becomes just scrappy. The Aussie line setting well. Smith spots how hard the Wallabies have worked away from the line-out and switches the play, but Frost drops George and England are going nowhere. It's scrappy rubbish ball, so they're forced to kick, entirely brought about by that heroic shithousery by Williams. Loliseo takes the bomb and replies long, and seeing an open field in front of him, Smith decides to have a crack. However, Loliseo runs his forwards onside and shuts off the other options nicely, prompting Smith straight into Fessler and Wilson, who strips the ball in the tackle right as everybody sort of settled into, oh, it's a choke tackle, right, we'll prepare for the scrum. And then they see an arm go out and they go, right, okay, it's a knock on, we'll prepare for the scrum. As such, England's chase is kind of half-hearted. And then Cunningham himself just shits himself when he sees Tom Wright opt to run. Wright has caught England completely off guard. He breaks through a couple of brilliant steps and stabs in the kick. And while Smith, in his typical all-round miracle afternoon he was having, just about beats McWright to the ball, pressure on it is enormous and takes incredible effort by England just to keep hold of it, never mind to clear up the 22. And from there, lungs filled with the spirit of adventure, Australia snap back into their short carry structure. They're playing so close to the breakdown, England aren't flying up, aren't blitzing anymore. They're just sort of standing off, yet still set in that incredibly narrow fashion. This feels like something England are going to have to and are going to learn from. Learn that this defence has situations where it probably isn't the best way to be running, isn't the best system to be playing, and learn to make those adjustments on the fly. It's something I believe they will do over the next 3 years, just there might be some more short-term pain as teams exploit a very, very set and very structured defence, as the Wallabies do here. Through smart carries, Australia have left England with all the downsides to their risk-reward defence, but none of the upsides whatsoever. This carry by Bell splits the English forward group yet again, just a Tojo nil now on the short side, yet with plenty of room as Australia set. Spencer has filled in on the wing and called for support, but Dombrandt and Stewart are slow to get across, and it means once a Tojo nil shoot out, they can't keep up, and hence the English forwards can't drift or risk opening up a dogleg. Gordon plays it wider, skipping a whole bunch of men to go on the outside of a Tojo, and while Spencer shuts this down, in order to adapt to the usual line, England have left space around the breakdown, which Valentini targets, causing them to then condense on the next phase. And so Loliseo goes for a double effort of kicks. The first thing is a beauty, over the top, giving Swally plenty of room for activities with Wright before the second cross kick to Kellaway, stretching them again. This is the plan, the play, the idea. Play tight, draw England in, disconnect that aggressive blitz, then hit the space wide. It doesn't come off this time, but with total belief in the plan now growing, the Wallabies run the same set again a few minutes later, hitting back and forth in the same areas, in many cases against the same defenders, over and over again. The English system is about speed and energy, and if you just got off the deck, it's so much harder to find that energy and make those dominant shots, even to keep up with your teammates blitzing out. Once we reach the final phase of this movement, England have two forwards on this blind side, right? George Martin and Chandler Cunningham himself. This whole sequence from line-up throw to here lasts 33 seconds. And in that time, George Martin has now attempted 5 tackles and Chandler Cunningham himself 6. It leaves the pair a split second more sluggish to get back up to their feet into the line, and hence allowing McWright to control the space. He's the guy on his own terms here. England can't blitz him properly, hence taking out both players as he ships it on to Jeremy Williams, hitting a line on the wing. The lock, who began all of this with his valiance at the line-out, is now in position to pull one of the year's great finishers, diving in the corner and just about squeezing his hulking frame in the field. And is the exact inverse in Harry Wilson's try. England react to these tight physical carries by keeping the line spaced out, opening a gap and trying to flood those channels medium distance so they can hit runners just off the ruck. And in turn, it opens up a gap around the French McDermott because no one's watching in tight, allowing him to race right through, offloading to his captain running a great support line to score. It's a tug and see situation. England want to condense their bodies together in order to exert maximum pressure, but if you can get as many of those bodies out of the game as possible for your carries, space will open up either inside or outside of that group, and it's then on the Wallabies to just adapt and look out for it. These two tries for me sum up what that Wallaby performance was all about. Tactical brilliance, incredibly bold moments, endless skill, fantastic physicality, superb carrying over and over again, but most of all, belief in each other, in their ability, but above all, in that spirit of adventure, that style of play, that game plan. The match was far from over. The Wallabies' difficulty controlling momentum did persist a little bit. Marcus Smith creating a couple of brilliant tries for Ollie Slightholme. First through the superb kick, hiding himself until the last second, then bringing both round and then sliding through the grubber. And the second from a quick line out, just so alert to the entire field, including calling this ball to miss him, knowing the Wallabies were fixated on him as England's most lethal player, the most deadly player, trusting his clubmate Dombrandt to deliver the try-scoring pass instead, which indeed he does, Slightholme running it in to score. Yet, that's the funny thing about belief. Once you've found it, once courage has once again truly lodged itself in your sticking place, it's hard to let go. Momentum be damned, the Wallabies played that final 20 like a team who believed they were going to produce one of the green and gold's greatest ever days. I just had this weird sixth sense watching them live that they were going to score an intercept try the entire second half, and when it came, it felt spot on, a meeting point between the exuberance of their attack and effort of their defence, all prompted by Len Ikitau's simple refusal to ever make an incorrect decision. Finished by Kellaway looking like a small kid running away from the bullies. Or dogs, depending on the neighbourhood you lived in. They held out repeatedly, thanks to brilliant efforts like this from Valentini, man of the match for me, just sensational, to close down Earl and help Jorgensen introduce Slightholme to his close friend, the best defender. And even once the English score did come through the ever-excellent Mario Itoje, covered in very different styles by the game's two commentary teams.
Once again, Itoje! Drawing close to the post, Itoje's over.
The Wallabies found a way, possibly via P. Sherman in Sydney. Now, I've not talked too much about individual performances, mostly because I'd be here so long you'd make up the time difference between London and Melbourne, but let's just speedrun them, right? Rob Valentini, incredible. Attack, defence, a lot. One of the best games I've ever seen one of the best players in the world play. Harry Wilson, utterly brilliant. Him, Valentini, McWright might quietly be one of the best bounce back rows in world rugby. Jeremy Williams, incredible. Len Ikitau, beyond world class. Legitimately perfect performance from the 12. Noel Alceo had one of his most assured, confident, composed games in a gold jersey. Angus Bell, on an utter rampage. Unstoppable, brilliant. Matt Fessler, pretty much pitch perfect. Tom Wright, just incredible. One of the best games of his entire career to date. Every risk he took coming off. And yet, all of that leads us to his new garage karate partner, Joseph Swalihi. It was safe to say that is a pretty remarkable debut. Not just because of the flashy shit, but because he was so tactically and positionally composed. To remain so defensively sound at international level is even more impressive than pulling the odd magic moment that we knew he had in the locker. It was hugely impressive. And yet, perhaps the most interesting part of this debut was the fact that this game created a whole new world we have to look into, where we just have to kind of accept that the Wallabies are possibly never going to lose a restart again. In a team who've had their struggles with maintaining momentum, having a weapon like this from the kickoff is incredible. Almost like a miracle, allowing them to get back in control of the game in an instant. And that's exactly what they did with seconds left on the clock, prompting Itoje into a knock-on. And then from the scrum, the short ruck, quick ball, two defenders off the feet tactics that's got Australia this far comes back into play, but maybe in its best and boldest form so far. Ikitau's initial carry is superb, and it allows Gleeson to be in position long before Earl, who he bumps off. England make a mess the next few phases, but Australia keep hold and keep it tight. It's an extremely similar setup, with sneaky pick and goes, a scrum half snipe, tight carries, and then one expansive phase to the Wilson and Williams tries earlier, but England are alert, alive, and switched on. After the way McDermott scooted through for the Wilson try, England opt to defend tighter, leaving no space around the ruck, and it brings the entire defence in with it. By the fifth phase, this has made a huge knock-on effect. The picture is so inopportune for England. Itoje having to watch the fringes instead of apply any pressure, Earl is reloading, he's kind of out the game, and the front row are all grouped together here. Cole and Baxter having to make the last tackle, creating a potential easy target, guys getting back up to their feet. Donaldson spots this. There's only two defenders watching the extreme outside that front row, and so a lot of space. To exploit this, he runs two phases in order to reload. He makes this call early, letting the full team know they're going to play, as he's going to follow Swalihi into the breakdown. This carry is smart, small, and basically only happening so they can head back into the same area again a moment later, going right so they can go back left. Their best carrier, Valentini, who again was sensational, carrying into two props who've just got back up to their feet a few seconds ago. Bobby V's carry is fantastic and leaves England harrying to get around the corner and face an Aussie line that starts to take position right as Donaldson entered the ruck. And yet they had no time to react to. With just two England forwards planted on this side, they both set their feet to smash Payanga and Mosa, because it's all been forward carries up until now, but Donaldson has wrapped round last second and caused the ball out himself, meaning Slade has no time to call support on spotting him, so can only fly up himself, but this cuts him off from his two forwards. Donaldson able to flick the ball on. McWright's involvement then is just a second guess Slightholme, the winger having to adjust his feet last second, allowing Ikitau to slip onto his outside as he takes the ball. The centre gives a tiny fend. Eyes always on Smith at fullback, but ball in one hand. Marcus Smith has received some flack for coming in here, but if you look at this freeze frame, it feels pretty clear that Ikitau has now beaten Slightholme, and yet, whilst the winger does make up the ground, both players commit at once to Ikitau, who is taken out, but has one hand free to flick maybe the best pass of the year. Jorgensen takes it on the wing, and Australia's comprehensive taking guys off their feet now means Earl and Dombrandt are fixed, and the only guy tracking across is hooker Luke Cowan-Dickie. Jorgensen burns them with ease. Ford tries to cut him off, but it isn't enough. Max Jorgensen was born in England, in Sheffield, in 2004, when his father, the former Wallaby Peter Jorgensen, was playing for Northampton Saints. Fittingly, the club of Max's opposite number on this day. Peter Jorgensen made his Wallaby debut in the team's first game after their 1991 World Cup triumph, alongside Liner, Campese, Farr-Jones, veterans of the '84 tour that changed everything for Australian rugby. This try was not just one of the finest of the year or most meaningful the Wallabies have turned out in a solid decade, it's one dripped in the history of the jersey. And yet, perhaps more importantly, it's one that dares to peek ahead to the future of the game and the future of the green and gold. The motto of that '84 team was many voices, one spirit, and it's an attitude that also captures how this modern team took to task on Twickenham. There's a unity, a spirit in how this entire young side bought into the adventure Grandmaster Smith had set them and saw it through until the very, very end. Never in doubt, never stopping to wonder about trying to win a penalty. Thinking, looking for the big play, the big try, and the win. The boys in gold now head to Cymru, the only game of the tour they'll enter as likely favourites, aware they're now a quarter of the way to recreating that history. There's a long road ahead, 3 tough games, but a young Wallaby side written off after a decade of inconsistency, embarking on a Grand Slam tour as enormous underdogs, is a story we've seen before. It's something nobody gave a chance to back then, but sometimes you can just see the legend being written before your own eyes. Thanks for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. We have had a big week. We covered the New Zealand v Ireland game as well. That's up now. There's also a look at Wales-Fiji on our second channel, Squid Rugby 2.
More Squid Rugby?
More Squid Rugby. Either of them works. Type either in and hopefully you'll find it. Look at Wales-Fiji. Then we've also got another one coming tomorrow.
Yes, where we look at basically every other game that's ever happened of rugby ever. Not really.
It feels
all
that
the
way.
international ones, the big international ones that happened this weekend. And from big, we consider, for example, Hong Kong versus Brazil.
Yeah,
like,
UAE v Zimbabwe.
Yeah, all the way up to South Africa versus Scotland. Or
Yeah. So there's bits of analysis on, Argentina, Scotland, South Africa,
France, Japan,
the teams you'd think of. But we've also, if you want to keep up on the world of rugby, on everything else that's going on, please have a look at that when that'll be out on our second channel tomorrow.
Yeah, it's exactly an hour of your time.
Yeah, worth saying as well that there's less on England than I thought we intended to do in this video, but it felt very Wallaby-centric, and I wanted to keep it to celebrating the Wallabies. And I think we'll probably pick up some more in England at some point in the future. Needless to say, I think this is just going to be what England are going to be like from now on. I think they're going to be brilliant against the big teams, and sometimes they've dropped the odd game like they did against Fiji last year, against teams like this. As a basic hypothesis of, we can go into more detail at another time. But in the meantime, I hope you're having a lovely time, and we'll see you soon for Rugby!
Max Jorgensen! No, he didn't! Oh my goodness me! Oh, it's unbelievable! It's one of the greatest moments in Wallabies history, and it belongs to Jorgensen. They have stunned England. They are winners in their opening Grand Slam game.